179. 179, Brother Justice. So.
You gotta talk loud when you get over.
Can you remember how old? I've got a home in glory land that outshines the sun. I've got a home in glory land that outshines the sun. I've got a home in glory land that outshines the sun. Way beyond the blue. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Way beyond the blue. I took Jesus as my Savior, you take him too. I took Jesus as my Savior, you take him too. I took Jesus as my Savior, you take him too. While he's calling you. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Way beyond the blue. Brother Summer, all we open us with a word of prayer, please.
Heavenly Father, Lord, as we come to you, Lord, we just thank you that we're able to come back on Wednesday night and worship you tonight, Lord. Lord, I just thank you for your love and your kindness toward us. Thank you for your work upon Calvary's cross, you rising again, the third day for our justification. Lord, I just ask now that you would be with Brother Fewell as he breaks the bread of life tonight, Heavenly Father. Lord, we will be fed from your word. May you receive honor and glory from our lives. For this I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. You don't know. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So that's half the battle right now. We've got an interesting study that I want to take a look at. Oh, I'm out, I think. An interesting study we're going to begin tonight. And what we're going to do is talk about, over the course of the next few weeks, maybe a little longer, we've got several chapters to cover in Amos. We're going to talk about this one subject, America, what's next? America, what's next? So over the coming weeks, we'll talk about that, take a hard look at the United States of America, and see if we can figure out what's next for America. And I will tell you, there were two things that really prompted me to go back and look at this in great detail. One was a documentary I watched, 2.5-hour documentary. Actually, I already made my outline when I watched the documentary, and it just perfectly fit right on into it. And the other one was, I got looking at this hurricane that hit the United States here, or Lake Charles, last week or so. I thought, why are all these bad things seem to be happening to America? And are they more than they used to be? Are they more accelerated than they used to be? I'm going to give you something to look at real quick. Oh, they made enough copies. We'll take a look at this. You get a chance. Whichever, help me out. And what you're going to be looking at, as you see that, is a copy of an article in the Atlantic magazine that came out here over the last couple of days. And what the article basically says is if you take a look at Hurricane Laura, the strongest storm on record to strike Louisiana, is yet another calamity on top of wildfires, windstorms, and pandemic. And what's the caption there? America is being pummeled by disasters. And so think about this for a second. We're going to embark on this great, I think it's a great study here. Why are all these bad things seem to be happening to America? Is there a reason for it? Can we go back biblically and trace another, has it happened before in any other country? And I got one more here.
None of us have any. Here, y'all can have one of mine. Bring it.
I thought you were enough. I apologize. we'll have copies and whatnot. I just didn't make enough copies, I apologize. But interestingly enough, we can find some biblical support for what we're going to talk about tonight over the next couple of weeks as this thing unfolds. First, let me tell you the format for how we're going to do this. This can be a little bit different. So if you have a comment or a question or a thought, please jump in. All right. So this is not going to be me up here just babbling away. So jump in. Your thoughts will be very well appreciated. But let me tell you how I study the Bible, and you may not disagree with how I do it, but here, this is the way I've always studied the Bible. I've never been able to sit down, like you said, Brother Summerall. I can't read the Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation, all the way through, because when I get to the begats, I'm done. So what I do is I study the Bible topically. There's some big events that happened to Israel and Judah over the course of time, and I always found it interesting, if you look at it very carefully, that you look topically, and you'll see that you'll find, well, let me give this example. Y'all all watch the Winter Olympics, have you not? And you got the giant slalom that's about to take place. And so the girls up there warming up, going through their mind what's about to happen. And you see the news reporter talking to a coach at the top of the hill. Then you got cameras and reporters all the way down the hill, right? At the end of the hill, at the end of the race, she gets down there, and you got a reporter down there as well. And you got somebody calling the whole game show back at the headquarters. So you're looking at the same event from 5 or 6 different angles. And that's what we're going to talk about today over the course of the next couple of weeks, is we're looking for the same big event, the Babylon captivity, or what's coming down the pipe from different perspectives. In other words, you have somebody who's polished like Daniel, who may be in the kingdom, who may be inside the castle talking to the king all the time, eating at his table. And you got Amos, who may be sitting on the outside talking about things to come, and Amos is nothing more than an uneducated farmer. But we'll look at that real carefully as we go through all this in the next couple of weeks. So your opinions, as I said, are not only welcome, but they're encouraged, and we'll kick it off now. Now take a look at Daniel chapter 9, verse 2, and we'll start there. So Daniel chapter 9 and verse 2. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. And so what happened is, Daniel and them were in captivity, and by reading the book of Jeremiah, he understood that they were going to be in Babylonian captivity for 70 years. Okay? So he read the Bible, and that's how he figured it all out. Same would hold true. If you read Isaiah, I think it is, chapter 45, verses 1 through 6. We're not going to go there now. But if you get a chance to read it, I encourage you to read that. In Isaiah 45, 1 through 6, you will see he called Darius his anointed. So he was anointed by God. Now this pagan king was anointed by God to do God's will, and he did it to fairly well. Okay, his job was to go through and take out Israel and Judah. He did all that, and so that's how we're going to approach all this over the coming weeks. We're going to approach this very carefully from the standpoint of America. In other words, can we learn something from Israel and Judah and the neighboring countries around us, how we're treated internationally? Can we learn something from what's happening to us over the next few weeks? So take a look at this. Let me ask you this question. Have you sat around a dinner table in the last couple of weeks and going, man, I wish 2020 were over. I'm ready to start 2021. Have you done that? I have. So I know I'm wishing my life away, but I said 2021 has got to be better than 2020, right? Now, what do you think? Could be worse? Could be worse. Let's talk about that. What do you think of what has made 2020 bad from a national or international standard? We just
presidential election.
Well, you got
exaggerated everything.
you're right. And plus, 2020, we all started off with an impeachment proceedings against President Trump, which was politically motivated. Anyway, you slice that one. So we just came off that coming down the pipe in 2020. What else happened in 2020 that made it a bad year so far? You got wildfires going crazy, right? You got wildfires. You got the pandemic, with COVID here, which is why you see all the Out on the dead body all over there. Yeah. So, what else made it bad? I think the economy became more volatile. People's 401ks became 104ks, and so on and so forth. So it became a very volatile economy. We have lost jobs. People who lost their jobs, lost their houses, and lost their means of making a living. I had a lady cut my hair. She said she lost her credit, couldn't buy her house, couldn't finish making a down payment because she couldn't pay her bills while she was off with the pandemic. That's just one example of many, many businesses that have been affected by all this. How about this question here? Do you think the rich get richer and the poor get poorer?
Yeah.
And you're in that business, are you not? Managing people's money. So, how about this one? Do you feel like your government is corrupt?
Teetotally.
Without a doubt.
Do you think that the rich take advantage of the poor?
Yes.
If I go pick a jury, I'll always find out the rich guy had jury duty and the poor are always stuck there. And so, I always consider the jury someone who didn't. I had 12 people who didn't have enough sense to get a jury duty. or no connections. And so, it's sad commentary, but truthfully, that's how you feel sometimes. How about this one? Do you think other nations hate us? Is that one of those duh questions? Duh.
I don't.
You know?
I don't. I mean, I really don't. I was just told very recently that, generally speaking, all Indonesians are trying to get to the United States. Now, they may be an isolated country, but that's their goal in life, is to be able to get to the United States.
Anybody else feel differently? Yeah, you're in the military, I think, were you not? And do you think, did you serve overseas?
I did.
And you did too, Jed. You're in Germany, right? Did other nations hate us? Do you think it's worse now than it was then?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, they hate us.
I know whenever we visited the Holy Land, we went over into Palestinian Authority, and we saw a bunch of kids getting out of school or whatever. They were walking down the street, and they were fascinated by us, you know, because a lot of tour groups don't go over there.
Right.
And so there was a usually 12 or 13-year-old boy who was almost the alpha male of the group. You know, he wasn't going to smile. He was going to check us out, you know. And we ended up playing with those kids and laughing and having a good time with them. And we finally wore him down too. But he asked me, he said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, we're Christians from America. We've come to visit the Holy Land, Israel." And immediately he said, "Israel is bad." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes." I said, "What about America?" He said, "Your president is bad." I said, "What about me?" He said, "You're good." That's okay.
It's funny you should ask that question, because the next question I have on my list is, do you think we're perceived in the world by as a Christian nation? Or do you think we have any perception at all? What do they call us, the Great Satan? In many of the Muslim countries? The Great Satan? How about this one? Do you think our borders are safe? I don't think so either.
They're safer than they were, but I don't think.
I
I
think
think
they
they're
are.
improving some.
They're still pretty porous, don't you
Yes.
think?
Yeah.
Yes.
How about this one? Human trafficking. Does that go on? Does that happen?
Yeah.
Has it gotten worse, you think?
Yeah.
Or are we just not
It's
deciding?
either gotten worse or we're just now really
Figuring it all out.
It's just
figured it
now,
out.
yeah, coming to light.
How about this one? Here's a good one. Have you noticed the weather patterns of rain, drought, and fire, things like that, have changed? Locales have become more intense some places as opposed to others? I have. I mean, the mountains have always had the wildfires, California. But I've noticed that they're covering more territory out in the Midwest as well. And here's another I like this one too. Do you honestly feel like that your government is honest with you?
no.
No. And here's my last question. Do you think America is more prosperous now, America as a whole, and Americans as a whole, than they've ever been? Or do you think we're not as prosperous? I think we are. I think we become more affluent, people have more money, but that's my thoughts. Sue, what do you think?
I think that's true.
I think
All
we're
these
more
questions-
more prosperous, but also a lot more irresponsible and a lot more debt than
We're talking
the
about that.
past generations have had.
That's coming. Sue.
Okay.
You keep doing that.
You're doing good, you're doing good. I'll pay you later.
That's why I'll be so patient.
Pay you later. Just pay me, I'll take it.
Okay. All these questions that I posed here today were asked or answered in the book of Amos. And it's not- these are all questions in the book of Amos that were the problems that Israel and Judah had during Amos's time. And Amos was called as a pastor, if you will, or an evangelist, to come out and denounce all the sins of Israel and Judah. But not until we get through all the countries surrounding Israel and Judah, okay? So what happens is he's gonna come out and he's gonna preach fire and brimstone against all the nations that surround all the Amos, the Judah and Israel. All right, and then he's gonna turn his attention to Israel and Judah. So I have this mental image that all the players, all the people who live in Israel and Judah are going,
Yeah.
Cap, go ahead, go get him, boy, go get him.
Uh-huh.
Hey, Pit Bull there, he got it. He's gonna go get Damascus and Syria and Tyre. Go get all those countries. And then all of a sudden he's gonna say, whoa, boys. Then he's gonna stop preaching and start meddling, right?
Yeah.
Start talking about the sins of Israel and Judah. But those are things we're gonna talk about starting here in a few minutes that we're going on then. So here's my last thought before we start in detail here. Book of Revelation. The book of Revelation. How many of you think the United States is mentioned in part or in whole, in any way, shape, or fashion in the book of Revelation? I find no support for the United States being in the book of Revelation, which means it's just another nation that's going to bend its knees, right? So what that means to me, and I may be wrong, is there are three options. Option number one, we'll become more Christian-like, more Christ-like. Everybody gets saved. So the whole nation as a whole is raptured out of here. Option number one. Option number two is some other nation comes in and conquers us. All right. So then we cease to be relevant in that regard. Or number three, the question is why were we put here to begin with? Why were we put here to begin with? Which is, are we here to simply to facilitate and protect Israel? Right? Is that our job? Did God put us here to facilitate the prophecies that will be fulfilled with the nation of Israel? And you may think differently when you go through all this. I lean towards number one for a long time that God was, we're not a Christian nation as a whole. We're becoming less and less Christ-like every day. And what you're going to see is, I think now more than ever, I believe that what we are is a nation here simply to facilitate and protect Israel for a period of time until prophecy, or until we cease to be relevant. And I hate that, but I think that's true. Where we're headed, if we keep going down this road that we're going down. So if you have your Bibles, turn to the book of Amos, and where you're going here. Let's see. And we'll start in chapter 1, in verse 1. We found the bookmark here. My glasses broke today, so I can't really see me well. I got my spares on. And while we're waiting, I have a copy of an outline here. For those of you who didn't get a book, I have an outline of the, I think there are enough copies to push over. Pass those up. That is an outline of our book, our text that we're going to be over the next couple of weeks, time to go through. Here we go. Amos chapter 1 verse 1. The words of Amos, who was among the herdmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. So he's setting all this up for you about who he was, what he was, and where he came from, and what year he was doing his preaching. So, and I have another article, we won't spend more time going through that, but long story short, what he's going to be doing is telling his story from his perspective and what he did during his period of time here he's preaching. So in verse 2 he says, and he said, the Lord will roar from Zion and utter his voice from the Jerusalem, and the habitation of the shepherds shall mourn, and the top of Carmel shall wither. And so what you see here is, he begins his preaching ministry here, and it's pretty cool here. What he's going to do over the course of the next few chapters is point out all the ills of the countries around Israel and Judah. And we'll come back to point out all the ills of Judah and Israel. Okay? That's how this song is going to go. All the way around, we're going to circle around the nation here. But in 1770, Oliver Goldsmith said, ill fares the land to hastening ills of prey, where wealth accumulates and men decay. Now, when do you think you least need God? When money is good, health is good, and things are rocking and rolling, right? Now, what brings you to your knees and to God's house? After I saw 9/11, the tires come down, you couldn't get in the church anywhere you went, right? So when God brought them to their knees, what you saw is the lines up to the church, and that's what they're doing. So after 9/11, I saw that repeatedly. And then you can start seeing it here at our church, right? People come to church that hadn't been there in a while, pretty soon they dwindle all down, and pretty soon nobody's there at all. And so we're a very prosperous minded God. I call us 911 Christians, right? When things get bad, we're going to call 911 and we'll go see God and see what happens. But that's what was happening in that day in Israel and Judah. So he's going to talk about the denunciation of these sins, first of the 6 nations around. Take a look at verses, let's talk about the Gentile nations and the judgment. He says, for 3 transgressions and 4. I like that way he put that. Look at Amos chapter 3 and verse 8. And they laid themselves down upon clothes laid to pledge by every altar, and they drank the wine of the condemned in the house of their God. What was going on in Israel and Judah is they were very prosperous, and they're going to church like they're supposed to, right? But are they worshiping? Are they worshiping? No. They're going through the motions. You go, huh?
Amos 2:8.
2:8, okay. I misspoke. Thank you. So what's going on is that they get this, they're going through the motions of being Christians. But when they went home, they had idols that they made to the god Molech. And what happened to Molech? They would take and sacrifice their kids to Molech. Horrible things going on in the nation of Judah and Israel. Things are happening here in where we are now. Now look at Amos 1, verses 3 through 5. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have threshed Gilead with threshing instruments of iron. But I will send a fire to the house of Israel, which shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad. I will break also the bar of Damascus, and cut off inhabitants from the plain of Avon, him that holdeth the scepter from the house of Eden, and the people of Syria shall go into captivity and occur, saith the Lord. So number 1 is hit us here is who? What nation do we number 1 is hit this? He talks about Damascus, Syria. Damascus, Syria. So what is he going to do here? He is going to, Damascus is capital Syria, And he talks about the thresh them as though nothing was off screen. What he's doing here, he's unhappy about the fact that what they're doing to the Jews is beating them, okay, mistreating them. That's how I read this. They're mistreating the Jews here. And so he says, I like this quote too. It says, I will send a fire. Now what's fire a picture of? God's judgment. But that's what's coming down the pipe, is God's judgment. So it says the dynasty of King Hazael ended. His son Ben-Hadad was defeated. Damascus lost his power. The house of Eden, which means delight of paradise, became a ruin. In other words, what's happening to Damascus is about to be made into a parking lot. Okay? Let me paraphrase all this for you. They're gonna make Damascus a parking lot. And so, now who would do this? The Assyrians. And so if you read your book of Daniel, Daniel's predicting 4 nations coming on the scene primarily, right? So who's the first one? Babylon. But actually, before Babylon, you have the Assyrian Empire. So the Assyrian Empire is there. Now, so that's all before Daniel's time. And when Daniel starts predicting, prophesying what's coming down the pipe, he starts with Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. Who's the next one? I can't hear you.
Medes and Persians.
Medes and Persians, right. Which gives us back to about that 45, 1 through 6, right? Who's after that? And who was in charge of Greece? Alexander the Great. Who's number 4? Rome. Okay. Now, so those are, I mean, everything he says here is going to fit like a glove with the prophecies of Daniel. Watch this here. Look at the next one here in Philistia. Amos 1, 6 through 8. 1, 6 through 8. What did it say here? For 3 transgressions of Gaza and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof. Now what that means basically saying, I've given you 1,000,000 chances, okay? And I'm done with it. I'm done with it. And by the way, when you get a chance to read that article I gave you on the Atlantic, I printed out the Atlantic magazine, he blames global warming for all the junk happening there. There's warming involved. I think God is warming up to get our attention. I want to share that with you. Look at this verse. Here we go. Look at verse 6 through 8 of chapter 1. 7. But I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof, and I will cut off the inhabitants from Ashdod. Him that holdeth the scepter from Ashdod, I will turn mine hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines shall go, perish and go forth. Thus saith the Lord thy God. And so, what happened here with these people, if you read the rest of chapter 1 here, in the verses that apply to Philistia, they were doing human trafficking. Human trafficking. That's what they were doing. And you'll find a lot of, so there were 5 key cities that were in Philistia. In Israel here, Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. So what they're doing is human trafficking, which is no different than what we're doing today, right?
That's right.
So, and God condemned it then, and God's going to condemn it now. And so, do we see that going on more and more? How about Epstein, right? Was it Jeffrey Epstein? And I think Clinton and everybody else going to be involved in that was all said and done. But they would take, what they would do is they would raid the Jewish villages, capture the people to be sold. But that's not bad enough. What they were doing is selling these people to the Edomites. Now, who were the Edomites? Edom was descended from Esau, who had a brother, right? Him and his brother didn't get along very well, right? I mean, that's minor, is that a minor statement, understatement?
Yeah.
So they didn't get along. Now what you got here is, so of all the people they could sell these people to, you got a brother enslaving a brother, essentially. That's what's going on. And God took a dim view of it then, and God's going to take a dim view of it now. Now why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because that's what's going on in our country right now, human trafficking. And so what's going to happen is, God's going to get our attention. And I think that's what he's trying to do with the pandemic, and the wildfires, and the floods, and the hurricanes. I think he's trying to get our attention, don't you? And I think you'll become convinced of this when we get through this lesson in the coming 2 or 3 weeks. That God's going to get our attention one way or the other. And so when he does that, I mean, there's going to be time to pay. How much time do I have?
All the time you want, as far as I'm concerned. It's 6:30.
Oh, it's 6:31. So do I need to stop? keep going then. Now, one thing that, it was one thing to take a prisoner of war and make him work, but it's an entirely different thing to take one of God's people. Think about this. Are slaves not created in God's image too? Absolutely they are. They are. I mean, they're different than me and you. God created them just like us. And when they get born again, are they going to be our brothers and sisters in Christ? And when I see them in heaven as brothers and sisters up there, sure we will. And so God takes I don't think God likes slavery. But He doesn't like more than anything what's happening in this country here with human trafficking. And God's going to take a dim view of it. He'll take a dim view of it here with our country for long if we're not careful. Now take a look at this one. We're going to look at, I'll stop here on Tyre. Amos 1, 9 through 10. That's going to be our next country. Amos 1, 9 to 10 is the country of Tyre. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Tyre, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they delivered up the whole captivity to Edom, and remember not the brotherly covenant. But I send a fire on the wall of Tyre, which shall devour the palace thereof. So Tyre, think about this for a second. When Solomon built this temple, who helped him build the temple? By providing cedars.
Yes, sir.
Who was that? Tyre. He hired him to get Tyre, wasn't it? So you got him. Now, so who's been friends, covenanted, treaty type friends forever? Tyre. Now what's going on here is that Tyre has forgot that relationship that they had. And so what's happening is God's going to, through Amos, is going to set his sights on North Phoenicia and the major city of Tyre. So they have this covenant relationship. Now look at it in the middle of page 14. Tyre committed the same sins as Philistia by selling Jewish captives to the Edomites as slaves. Human trafficking. Did the same thing. Now, if you're friends, can you imagine England and France and countries that have all been allied with us, for the most part, selling Americans on the market, black market, as human trafficking? Can you imagine what kind of view God would take of that? Yeah, and we'll keep going as we go through all this over the coming weeks. And I will tell you this. Do you know that Tyre does not exist anymore? Now, who wiped Tyre off the map? Alexander the Great did. And they're not even a parking lot. I mean, you can't find any place where Tyre even existed except God's word here. And so, in fact, he was in a poem by Rudyard Kipling when he talks about the utter destruction of the nation of Tyre. We'll talk more about that next week. Finish up here. Brother Brandon, you want to take our turn? Do you have any questions or comments? No? I will shut this thing down. We'll do prayer requests. So anyway, I think we're going to have fun going through all this. And you'll get chill once when you get through studying all this, because you realize exactly all the things that we're talking about here were identical almost in every respect to the way America's conducting her business. So being prosperous. And all these sins they're committing, we're doing the same thing. So I think God's going to get our attention if we're not real careful. So Brandon?